point to Greg Williams. Fine. And there's no getting a jump on the hiring cycle anymore because there's now a start date, a point where teams can really start actually doing this. And the reality is if teams want to back channel, they can be building anyway.
Right. Well, it would make very little sense for the Dolphins at this point, but they are certainly reeling. And when a team is reeling, you're always looking for someone to blame. We had some technical problems at the start of the broadcast. We had some technical problems on the site today, too. We had our forums down most of the time. That was not the Web Dorks' fault. Our technical problems here were the Web Dorks' fault. I forgot to click a button, but we are online now. And Pete and I are prepared to dive into the events of the day. And what I would like to start off with, Pete, is talking a little bit about this defense that the Cleveland Browns put together. They held Miami, which has a quick hitting offense and a very good running back. They held them to 219 yards on the day. They got 4 sacks, 3 interceptions, 1 fumble. A real turnaround from the Steelers game and a dominant defensive performance. The Browns have been having a little bit of trouble recently with quarterbacks like Aaron Rodgers who have quick releases and have effective short passing games. What did the Browns do to counter that? They got sort of the same thing in Tua with Miami last week, and he has some weapons. What did they do to counter that other than be in Cleveland and enjoy the weather?
Yeah, so, I mean, normally the Browns play so much man coverage and rely heavily on their front four to get pressure. Maybe they'll send a linebacker as an extra rusher. In this game, the Browns utilized a whole bunch of defensive back blitzes and played some zone behind it. They dropped some defensive linemen with some zone blitzes and some things like that. And, for a team – that we talk, Jim Schwartz likes to talk in terms of pitches, has had a great fastball. They have really had trouble coming up with an effective second pitch, and they've messed around with some zone stuff in the past. Whatever it was in terms of the combination of factors, whether it was the weather, whether it was the opponent, whether it was pressure from Myles Garrett and others within that locker room, whether it was the acquisition of Tyson Campbell or just Jim Schwartz deciding this was the time, it was a different change. This in 3 years, I don't remember Jim Schwartz sending defensive backs like he did in this game. And for a team that doesn't do this very often, they looked pretty good doing it. Grant Delpit had some really good timing in the blitzes he had. He was able to cause a sack, and then backed up in their own end when Delpit was unblocked and unrecognized. Tua not wanting to take a safety, just threw the ball and found Rayshon Jenkins wide open and hit him, and not able to turn that into another touchdown. So, this is an isolated incident, and I'm asking this question sort of like trying to figure out why now, why all these things have happened, because my hope is that this is going to be something where the Browns continue this going forward. Heading into next week with New England against Drake May, who's he's still a young quarterback, and maybe some of these things can cause some problems because so much of the time when opponents get to see the Browns in the same defense over and over and over again, it's man coverage. Like, there's not a whole lot of surprise there. You can eventually figure it out. Giving them a real second opportunity. One, you have Myles Garrett in this really good pass rush. If all of a sudden you now have to account for a safety coming off the edge or a corner coming off the backside or something like that, it creates some opportunities for big plays. Now, it comes with risk. If you're sending DBs forward, that means they're not back there playing coverage. At points, we saw, Miami get some yardage, get some guys in space, but we didn't see the huge busts that we've seen from this team in the past when they've run some zone stuff. Yes, they had the big play by Devin Achane, but that wasn't a pass. That was a run. Tyson Campbell was able to chase it down, which is a great play by him, and he's quickly showing his value there. But just in terms of the passing game, the Browns were able to keep the Dolphins out of the end zone. And you put all those things together, and if you can keep that going, I think the players will love this. I think the players are going to be excited about being able to do this. And two, if it works and gives you another thing, then suddenly you're talking about we've been talking about how good this defense can be, and now all of a sudden you get these games where you're just like, they are edge of the seat viewing fun because you just never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Was a lot of fun. Just as a fan the other day, but very effective as well. And do you think that there's going to be some, ramifications of this with teams being less aware of what they're getting into with Jim Schwartz? It was very, from what I can tell, a very different look for the Browns defense. And now they got some tape on it. They don't know whether to expect man or zone or blitz or not, or whatever's coming from Schwartz. It seems like the Browns' defensive tendencies would be a little bit more unpredictable right now. Difficult to plan against.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point. Create some uncertainty, especially for a young quarterback. And Drake May is really good, but that's now they've got to sit there, and Josh McDaniels and that group has to sit there and go, we have to prepare for this. And it's just one more thing they have to do, as opposed to, well, we've got to deal with Myles Garrett. We've got to come up with a solution. We can block him with 3 guys and see how the rest of this thing goes. Well, that's fine. But all of a sudden, if Grant Delpit's coming off the other side or something, and he's in Drake May's lap, then that's a problem. And Drake May's got to deal with that. So creating different looks in terms of what they can expect in coverage, creating different opportunities for guys to step up and make plays, certainly good. They've got to carry this thing over. And then the other part about this is, like, this has answered the biggest criticism I've had with Jim Schwartz, is that he just sort of does the same thing over and over again, and teams can sort of figure that out. So if this is him evolving and adapting, or just his natural progression of where he wants this thing to go, great. Because if they can do this well, they give themselves such a huge opportunity. Because, if you're a Browns fan, you sit there and you watch that team 90 miles or 90 minutes east, things with turnovers, and you sit there and you go, why can't we do this? And all of a sudden you get a game plan that shows you those things where you can, and you've got all these different elements where the opponent has no idea what's coming. I mean, look, Alex Wright by no means is some great player, but he was really good in space ball plays. He's a giant human being, and suddenly he's tracking down guys like a linebacker at points. You get to see Grant Delpit do a whole bunch of things you don't get to see him do often. This looked like him in college, and all the different ways he was utilized. It just gives you more ways to use these players and maximize their talent. And what's the takeaway coming out of this game? I've got people talking about, hey, should we extend Alex Wright? I'm not there yet, but I understand. Or talking about how really good Grant Delpit is, and I agree. And like, these are the things where it really showcased the talent that this unit really has in a way that is a little bit unexpected to make plays and cause problems for the opponent.
2 other guys I noticed, both safeties during the game, seemed to have very good games as well. And that was Ronnie Hickman was one of them, and Rayshon Jenkins another. Obviously, Rayshon Jenkins with the interception. Ronnie Hickman with a couple of key plays. Is that encouraging? I always had safety as sort of one of our needs going into next offseason, but I was really impressed by those guys.
I'm very encouraged by what I saw from Ronnie Hickman, and there's a clip floating around of him talking about basically it appears to see a look from the offense, and he's saying, give it to me, give it to me, Tua, and this and that, and all of a sudden Tua throws the ball and he intercepts it. That is very encouraging for me, because it suggests Ronnie Hickman is doing the work in terms of studying and preparation and tendency and getting a sense of the game. And it pays off immediately. He makes that interception. Now, I also appreciate the fact that Ronnie Hickman got up and immediately saw a flag and was terrified, sitting there going, oh my God, this is going to be on us, until he's finally validated, knowing it was on the other team. But that stuff is really good. Now, Rayshon Jenkins had a good game. He was in the right place in the right time. A couple different in as that third option. Rayshon Jenkins has experience at all 3 safety spots. He's played deep, he's played in the box, and he's played in slot. This game, The Browns like the matchup in terms of him playing down in the slot against some of the things. And right place, right time certainly works for you, but he's a vet. He knows how this is supposed to go and did, really showcased himself well in a similar manner that we got accustomed to for 2 years with Rodney McLeod.
Right. Hey, if you are in YouTube or Twitch, you are in the chat rooms, please feel free to let your voice be heard. First couple of minutes of the show, Pete, for some reason, I thought it was more web internet problems, but things were kind of quiet in the chat room. It made me feel like we were sitting here alone. So, guys, come on, ask us questions. Be the third member of the gang tonight. Would appreciate it. Question from Philip Badalamente. He says, can I also say how effing sick I am of this D giving up 25-yard completions to wide open receivers? What is up with that? Maddening. In this day and age, Pete, are there any teams that aren't giving up 25-yard completions to wide open receivers at times? I'm not sure exactly what Philip is referring to there, but is that an aspect of Jim Schwartz's defense that occasionally there'll be miscommunication and somebody will get wide open, or is it just part of the game?
There were a couple plays where the Browns gave up. One, in man coverage, every so often you're going to get guys rubbed, and it's just going to create separation and allow an easy completion and run after the catch. That's what living in man is, and that's why I'm glad that the Browns are changing things up. Now, at one point, they did give up a big completion in zone because the opponent just found where the natural hole in the zone is, and that's going to happen at points. And that's sort of the risk you take with what they're doing on defense. But ultimately, the reward was significantly outweighed the risk. They got a couple plays. They were able to get a couple drives. But the good news was that when the Browns sort of even allowed the Dolphins to get to their side of the field, they bowed up, kept them out of the end zone, held them to a couple field goal opportunities, or particularly in the second half, the Dolphins had to go for it on fourth down, and the Browns were able to hold up and get them off the field. But if you're going to take some of these risks, the then advantage there is you can potentially get turnovers. And obviously the fumble was on kickoff return. Not that I'm going to complain, but the 3 interceptions were just on defense and these type of coverages that cause problems where, man coverage does not generally lend itself to making interceptions because the guys in man coverage, eyes on the receiver, trying to play the hands, and maybe they're trying to turn their eyes late. The interceptions in this game, they're in zone or playing high behind man coverage or some sort of combo coverage. Now they're able to play looking at the quarterback, seeing the ball coming, and go make a play on the ball. And you saw those 3 picks the way they made those plays in this game. And you almost got a fourth one out of Miles Harden doing something similar where he was able to see Quinn Ewers pass and it should have caught it, made a great read on it, and could have had the ball. So, look, there is no perfect defense. You are always vulnerable to something, and NFL teams and NFL coaches get paid with NFL caliber talent. They're eventually going to figure it out and make plays. It's just how it goes. You cannot be perfect. But in this game, the 219 yards offense, the 3.8 yards per play, those are really good numbers to have and certainly allowed you to win by 4 scores.
Right. After the game, Mike McDaniel, who had a very bad day, maybe made it worse a little bit. I don't know where the bus was located, but he sure threw Tua under it. Said he made mistakes, left plays on the field, threw some bad throws, whatever. How much of this, in your mind, Pete, was the defense playing one of their best games of the year? And how much of it was the Dolphins quarterback really struggling? The Dolphins in general seeming, as Bill Cowher said, disinterested in the second half. Is this a true judge, I guess I'm asking, of the Browns defense and what they're capable of?
I mean, the bottom line is no, and that's partly because of the weather involved. They're going to play better teams. And, if you get lured into a false sense of this is going to be how it's going to go, they could easily give up a bunch of points next week against the New England Patriots, who have really good quarterback play, and some talented receivers like Stephon Diggs, and some ability to create plays in that way. But all the Browns could do in this game was play the game in front of them. The only opponent, the best opponent they were going to face this week was the Miami Dolphins, and they beat them pretty good. Yes, Tua certainly probably left some few plays on the field, certainly threw interceptions that were not good, or misfired in the one that ended up in Tyson Campbell's hands where he overthrew it for a pick six. But that's sort of the nature of the beast. And your job as a defense is to create as many of those situations as you possibly can. Pressure breaks pipes and all those type of things. So the Browns did a good job of putting the Dolphins in awkward positions and forcing some of those plays, which is, the same thing that opponents are doing to the Browns offense.
Right. We've got some additional questions here. We are going to get to those here really quick. But the first thing I want to talk about is a guy that you just mentioned, Pete. Tyson Campbell obviously made a huge play with this 34-yard interception return for a touchdown, made a number of other very good plays during the course of the game, matched up against the Dolphins, quality receivers in Waddle and so forth. After 2 games, can we declare victory here on this trade? Is Tyson Campbell a better fit for this defense, in your opinion, than Greg Newsome was, or do we need more film?
Hey, he's a fantastic fit for this defense. And the one thing he has over Greg Newsome is there's more of him. He's more physical. And the Browns don't have that right now with Martin Emerson injured. Greg Newsome is a very talented corner, can play man coverage at a high level and do all those things. But there's just more of Tyson Campbell, and you can see the physicality. He's been a hand-in-glove fit for the scheme. And then for the 34-yard interception is great. It basically closed the door on the game. Was not really far and away not his best play in the game. He didn't give up a reception in any of his at any point in this game. And then he obviously had a big pass breakup in the end zone where they tried to throw Tyson Campbell, just on effort, has run down a ball carrier and kept points off the board. Last week, certainly not as fast as Devin Achane, but Darnell Washington running down the field. Tyson Campbell hustles, is able to punch the ball out, cause a fumble. Unfortunately, the ball bounces out of bounds. The Browns don't get it. The Steelers keep it. But the Browns kept them to a field goal. At least 3 points saved there. And then this past game, Devin Achane is able to break open a 46-yard run. Tyson Campbell, Devin Achane is one of the fastest backs in the league. Tyson Campbell is able to run him down, tackle him. The Browns defense does their job, forces a field goal, and again, saves at least 3 points. Coaches love this, but it sets a tone for everybody else, because if this guy who's been here 20 minutes plays this hard, it eliminates excuses for anyone else. And I like Greg Newsome. I have no problem with Greg Newsome. I wish him all the success in the world. But if you're the Browns, I'm sure there are more than a few people who are sitting there saying to themselves, Greg who? Because Tyson Campbell's been that good, that fast. There was a report, or I should not report, an article suggesting that the Browns made the trade for Tyson Campbell with an eye on next year. Clearly, Tyson Campbell didn't get that memo, because he seems to be playing really well right now, and and I give him all the credit. And it's partly a credit to the Browns. They were able to put Tyson Campbell on the field as a starter basically 3 days after he got here. And this is not a criticism of the Jaguars. I think this is probably a more natural instinct. Greg Newsome, to this point, has been sort of a guy who comes into the game when the Jaguars put 3 corners on the field, and he plays one of those outside corners. He's not playing full time right now. So you have to love this as a Browns fan, but hopefully for Greg Newsome's sake, it works for him. But if you're a Browns fan, you don't care. I mean, outside of the human element, you're just happy you've got really good corner play from both Tyson Campbell and Denzel Ward right now. And his tone, the way he plays, the attitude, somebody mentioned in the chat, AFC North corner. And this is the type of football they're going for. And then, as a bonus, the big driving force for this trade was the Browns answered a question for the foreseeable future. Greg Newsome was on, was going to run out of his contract by the end of this year. The Browns were either going to have to sign him to a contract maybe they weren't comfortable with, or find somebody else to come in and start. They get Tyson Campbell, who's under control for several more years, and the next two are very cheap. The rest of this year and next are very cheap. And now they have no question. And it also gives them some flexibility because maybe they probably want to sign Martin Emerson back, but at a reasonable cost. It sort of allows him to see how well he can rehab from that Achilles injury, because you've got this security blanket in Tyson Campbell that makes sure you've got that addressed and allows Martin Emerson to come back, not as somebody you're depending on, but as a great option if he can fully recover.
Right. As I was thinking about the Browns defense, sort of searching for weaknesses, in that starting 11 and a little bit further back, because obviously Schwartz does a lot of rotation, especially on the defensive line. All I was coming up with was, Newsome doesn't seem to tackle sometimes, and our safeties are not, going to make anyone not want to draft Caleb Downs. But after yesterday's game, I mean, Campbell stepping up, and Hickman and Jenkins playing well along with Delpit. Obviously, Delpit had a great game. Where's the weakness in this Browns defense? As a opposing quarterback, where do you go? What do you do against this Browns defense? They are, I'm having trouble identifying a weakness, Pete, but I'm sure that the opposing NFL coaches can.
Look, free safety is going to be a question mark. I think Ronnie Hickman is a little bit of a roller coaster still. And Miles Harden still has to really prove himself in the slot. But if those are your two biggest issues, if you're down to 10 and 11 on your defensive depth chart, then Jim Schwartz has to sit down quietly while the Browns draft so the Browns can just address the offensive side of the ball. Caleb Downs is a phenomenal football player. He's definitely, he's better than Ronnie Hickman. I'll put that out there. He's better than Ronnie Hickman. But at some point, the Browns are going to have to score some points.
Yep.
More threatening offense. I understand the idea that you're always trying to compete against. There's your standard at some point is like, well, I want all 11 guys to be great. At some point, you have to be able to live with some element of like that, but allowing the rest of the unit to sort of get guys to play just a little bit better. So maybe the Browns will try to get somebody else to sort of compete and see if he can develop along with Ronnie Hickman. The other part with Ronnie Hickman is this is his first year as a starter, and he's a third-year guy in the league. There's no reason he can't continue to get better at this and figure things out. Hopefully yesterday was a step in that direction. But yes, I mean, to look at this from the standpoint of how many positions are the Browns set on defense, it seems about 9 of them. Let's flip that to the offensive side of the ball. How many positions are we really comfortable with? It ain't 9.
That is for certain, for sure. At this point, there's a little bit of discussion in the chat room. Serge saying, "Hey, I want my, my reference to Caleb Downs. Sort of said, hey, I want my first few picks used on an offensive line, build the trenches, so on and so forth." What I will say is that it would sure be nice to be able to use those 2 first-round draft picks next year and feel confident that you already had a quarterback in-house and didn't have to trade up to get Mendoza or whatever. We are a long way from that point right now. But over the last 3 games, Dylan Gabriel has not given the ball away. He has not thrown a pick, contrasted to Joe Flacco, who turned the ball over 8 times in the first 4 weeks. That, to me, is a lot of what Kevin Stefanski wants. First, do no harm out of his quarterback. I guess the biggest question with Gabriel, I mean, you look at those stats, 116 yards, that's not going to get it done in the NFL. No touchdowns, no interceptions, obviously great, pretty good rating. So he did fairly well. Pete, are you seeing progress from Dylan Gabriel these last 3 starts? you think there's room for further progress to the point where we may not be looking for a quarterback next draft?
I would say that, well, let's start here. You mentioned the turnovers. The Browns in their last 3 games are combined +6. That has gotten them back to even. So, yes, Kevin Stefanski has to be very happy about that. They were in a deep hole. They've dug themselves out of it. As for Dylan Gabriel, he's getting better in certain areas, but he needs to, again, I talk about this in terms of stagnation, and at some point he's going to have a eureka moment or something that's going to help him make a leap. I hesitate to crush him too hard given the conditions. The Browns I took the weather very seriously, and ultimately the weather wasn't as bad as everybody thought it was going to be, but they played it like it was going to be miserable with the wind and everything else. So as much as it's like Dylan Gabriel's numbers look terrible, you have to put it through the lens of what they were dealing with. Having said that, I need to see more from Dylan Gabriel, and I hesitate because he's only played 3 games. You don't want to like say you don't. I can sort of see the argument that there are people who are sort of like, well, Dylan Gabriel sort of is what he is, and he's not really going to get better. And while I'm inclined to say he's not going to be a long-term answer and somebody that's going to stop you from drafting the quarterback you really want, I do think he can get significantly better. The first time the Browns were in the red zone, the Browns ran a rub concept with Jerry Jeudy running an in-breaking route. Jerome Ford ran out of the backfield and wheeled up into the end zone. Jerry Jeudy gets decked. I can't tell if Dylan Gabriel is trying to throw to Jerry Jeudy and the ball and sort of stopped himself and threw the ball into the ground, or if the ball came out of his hand as he was trying to throw to Jerome Ford and the ball came out of his hand wrong and fell harmlessly to the ground. Either way, those are the plays that are schemed up really well, are open, and he's got to hit those. The other thing that sort of concerns me is there are a couple of instances where I thought his awareness for a guy who's supposed to be smart, is supposed to understand the situation, I thought were lacking. There was a play when the Browns were deep in their own end where I thought Dylan Gabriel took a really bad sack, and it became close to being called a safety. And the immediate reaction from the officials from the broadcast was they thought there was going to be a holding penalty or something in the end zone. It was going to be a safety. And given the state of the game at that point, that could have really turned it around and given the Dolphins a lot of hope. There are a couple situations where I think he's taking some poor sacks. I think his eyes have to be in the right place. And while I do not think it was really illustrative in this game, like Isaiah Bond didn't play as many reps as he had in previous weeks. Now, maybe that's a case of they're unhappy with Bond's practice performance or something like that. I think it had everything to do with the conditions. I think they put Malachi Corley on the field because he's bigger, he can block a little bit, and he's a guy you can get the ball in his hands and he can run. Whereas Isaiah Bond is not really great for, wind and downpour because he's a guy you want to stretch the field. However, if you go back to the Pittsburgh Steelers game, I think Sam Penix did a really good job of showing in his breakdown of how many opportunities Bond had down the field. And so far, I mean, Dylan Gabriel tried to throw one ball up to Jerry Jeudy late in the game against the Patriots, but they've got to open it up. He's got to open it up and throw the ball downfield because opponents are playing so many guys in the box. And as much as I want to, sort of criticize the running game for being sort of ineffective and say, well, the offensive line is struggling, it's really hard to be an offensive lineman and block when the opponent is just raining down guys on you because they have no worry that you're going to beat them in the passing game or push them downfield. Dylan Gabriel and the receivers have to be able to find a way to put some fear into defensive backs and make them take them seriously. One, if they can start hitting some of these, it will be very good for the offense and create more explosive plays. And two, even just threatening them is going to push them back a little bit and force them to play more of the field and potentially create more running room for Quinshon Judkins, who's clearly the driving force of this offense. But that's where Dylan Gabriel really needs to take a step forward and quickly. And just looking ahead next week, I don't think Dylan Gabriel can play, again, bearing in mind the weather conditions. New England's supposed to be a sort of normal fall day next week. They have to be able to. He has to be better if they're going to beat a serious team. That has to be better. He's got another team where you're gonna have to score at least 20, presumably, and he's got to be more of a threat and do some things. Now, for all the things I say I don't like about what Dillon Gabriel did, I did like the fact that he used his legs a little bit more, was able to get out and do some of those things, and made a great throw to Shamari Thrash for their lone explosive play that was 20-some yards down the field. That was encouraging, but I just want to see more. I want to see more of the plays. I want to see him get more of the plays that are scripted up really well, because I think Kevin Stefanski really called it a good game. It also felt like he had to work really hard to get this offense to get going because of the talent limitations.
Yeah, you explained a little bit of that in the post game. If people didn't watch the post game yesterday, go back and watch that show as well. Went into what Kevin Stefanski had to do in order to get guys open this most previous game. I guess the question is, and we have some folks here who would love to see Shedeur Sanders get an opportunity. And I can understand that, especially if you saw him a lot in college and saw his success in college and so on and so forth. But with Dillon Gabriel basically not making mistakes, and with it being difficult to evaluate the quarterback because of the line protection not being there, the wide receivers not getting separation, the other problems that are there with that passing game. At what point how does Sanders get an opportunity this year? Would we go through the year without seeing Sanders get a chance? I think the anticipation has been toward the end of the season, the Browns will roll Sanders out there a little bit because they'll be out of the playoff run or whatever. But if Gabriel continues to be, a mistake-free quarterback, how do you as a head coach rationalize getting a look at Sanders this year?
So as it relates to Dillon Gabriel, obviously it's the stuff I talked about. He protects the football, but at some point he's got to open this thing up a little bit, because they can't basically score 13 points and win many more games. And they have a bunch of games coming up that feel very winnable. They play, beyond. I'm just talking about teams who you sit there and you look at from here. The Jets have not won a football game yet. They get to play them. The Raiders looked god awful this past week. They get to play them. Those are games where, like, I think part of what helps Dillon Gabriel is the Browns won by 31-6. I think if they won this game 13-6, it certainly wouldn't put Dillon Gabriel on the hot seat necessarily, but it does start to raise more questions. If he doesn't start getting this thing going, the bye week is a natural pivot point in terms of where I think people will, if Dillon Gabriel plays poorly, will try to will the idea of Shedeur Sanders coming out of the bye week. Right. But here's the other problem. I can only evaluate what I see from a player who's on the field.
Right.
I can't evaluate what I don't see. Having said that, Shedeur Sanders is trying to work in his own sort of element. So he's obviously gets to practice. He gets to continue to work on his own. And if he's improving in the areas that he has struggled with, namely pocket awareness and some of his unwillingness to get rid of the football at points, and they start to see in practice that he gives them more of a downfield threat, of a guy who can make plays, then there will come a point where the Browns basically say, yeah, Dillon's protecting the football. He's also not scoring any points. And they will have to make a decision on that. We'll see. Because if Dillon Gabriel takes off, then you can see a real scenario where Shedeur doesn't end up playing. But for now, I still anticipate Shedeur Sanders gets to the field until Dillon Gabriel really starts playing far better, becoming more of an offensive threat. And yes, to your point, he's not getting a whole lot of help, but he does have the capacity to make some things happen and he's not taking full advantage of those opportunities.
I've said a couple of times on the forums, and people have rightfully and justifiably ignored it. But I would say, if I was scheming up the Browns offense, one of the very first things I do, in the first series or second series with Gabriel is just have him go long. I mean, not necessarily have the expectation that we're going to complete a 50-yard pass to Isaiah Bond or Jerry Jeudy or whatever, but just show the defense that we can stretch it, right? Show the defense that we are willing to throw the ball downfield, even if we don't necessarily, get a long touchdown out of it. Why don't the Browns do that? I guess my question to you, Pete, is to, show right off the bat, don't stack the box on us because we will attack you.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think that's got to happen. I think part of the reason they haven't done it, obviously this past game was the weather conditions. I think part of it is they don't feel like they have plays they can sort of waste right now in terms of, I think especially early in the game, the Browns feel like they feel good about their script, feel good about what it can do to get them points and get them going on the board. But yeah, somewhere on that script, they've got to take some shots. Now, even as I criticized Dylan Gabriel, there were multiple points in this game where I saw him clearly looking downfield and then ultimately not throw the ball. Now, whether he should have or not, unclear, but there were definitely, the Steelers game is the one where there were clearly opportunities down the field where he should have taken it. The Browns did call plays that allowed for some of those shots, and he only basically fired one towards Isaiah Bond that was incomplete. But yeah, they've got to do more of those things. Isolate one-on-one coverage. Try to throw the ball up to Jerry Jeudy. This is why you brought him here. Let him try to create something. Or if nothing else, try to put get Jerry Jeudy feeling like you're going to target him so he feels engaged and do those other things. But yeah, at some point, I'm hoping this week that the Browns are going to scheme up something that Dylan Gabriel really likes in terms of a play concept. They feel good about in terms of the receivers being able to execute and the pass protection being able to execute a block long enough that allows them to do one of those things. And it would be even better if one of them would be caught and either create some easy points or at least, create the explosive play that gets something going. Because when the Browns have gotten explosive plays, they score points. The problem is they don't generate enough of those explosive plays.
Yeah, clearly. Well, quarterback position, let's see if we have any more QB questions. I don't think we do. Levy, I'm going to get to your question here in a little bit when we start talking about the receivers. But just to illustrate the amount of craziness that is around the quarterback position, CBS Sports released a graphic showing that the last two quarterbacks with 100-plus pass attempts and exactly 2 passing touchdowns and 0 interceptions were Dylan Gabriel and Tom Brady. How's that for raising expectations, Pete? How's that for realistically telling the public that Gabriel is going to succeed at that level? It's just absurd. It's just absurd.
Well, it's one of those stats where it's like, the Browns are undefeated when, Saturn is in retrograde it's just so specific. It loses all meaning. There are certainly stats can be informative. This is one there's just like, it doesn't tell you anything.
Yeah, no, they have to get it down to saying it's exactly 2 touchdowns. It can't be 3, can't be 4, can't be 1. That's when you get the comparison with Brady. If that isn't absurd, here's a direct quote from our friend Skip Bayless. If Shedeur Sanders, with that Browns defense and emergence of Judkins slashing and gashing, had started at quarterback from the start, as he should have, the Browns would be the Vanderbilt of the North. Does that make sense to you, Pete?
Well, listen, Skip Bayless famously claimed that Johnny Manziel would be more famous than LeBron in Cleveland and be a bigger superstar. So, I mean, this is one of those things where Shedeur Sanders is a really good talking point for people who have no skin in the game, because you can always talk about, you're always going to get an audience, and that's nothing against Shedeur Sanders. He's being used as a prop in that sense because it drives ratings. So, I mean, we saw this throughout the offseason where, some of these, sports fight talking head shows would just lobby out something about Shedeur Sanders because there was nothing else to talk about, but he was really good at garnering plenty of attention and creating, getting an audience.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
So, I
Yeah,
mean,
we've seen.
that's sort of the name of the game with that. So, I mean, if you want to talk about the Browns right now, and you're talking from a national or even in some cases local radio, where you want to sound like you're his over-involved father, then he's an easy way to get attention and get yourself on places like Awful Announcing and those type of places.
Yeah, exactly. And Bayless obviously is good at it. I just quoted him, so I gave him a little bit of attention that he doesn't deserve. So blame that on me. But it's not really fair to Shadur either. It's setting certain expectations for him as a quarterback messiah that at this point, if the Browns saw that, the Browns would be happy to put him on the field, I believe. But they're apparently not seeing it in practice. We can't watch him in practice, so we can't tell you how things are going there. But any notion that the Browns are, rooting against Shadur or don't want Shadur to be successful are absurd. If Skip Bayless was right and Shadur was lighting it up in practice, I would have to think that they would find some excuse to get him on the field, Pete.
This team is dying for a quarterback to elevate this offense. If he was that good, and hopefully he can be at some point, they would absolutely have him out on the field. This notion that the Browns were the one team that was willing to trade up to draft him, and then they want him to fail is one of the most confounding elements to anything. They have every incentive for him to be successful. And I do agree that the expectations become unfair to him because we saw him really struggle in the third preseason game, and that caused two things to happen. One, the people who love Shadur have to hopelessly defend him in a way that doesn't make that defies anyone who has working eyes, or two, that you are then inclined to then pile on the kid who's a fifth-round rookie just trying to make it in the NFL,
right?
Or struggling in a game where it's not unreasonable for him to struggle. And this is the problem with a player like this. And I think Shadur does. In terms of the overall national element, he doesn't bring that on himself. However, he also doesn't sort of fight it in parts. He makes himself available in ways that I don't think make him a bad guy, but just sort of allow for opportunities for him to become the story in a way that it could rub people the wrong way. Everybody, I think they could hire a whole lot of coaches or general managers or whatever who are like, I don't want to deal with this, and immediately get him out the door if he's not showing a ton of improvement real fast because they view him as a distraction. I think the Browns, whatever you want to say about them, they don't make it into a big deal that he's around. They don't allow, when Kevin Stefanski asks what I think are leading questions in terms of trying to get a response about, well, Shadur says he's capable of coming in and playing at a super high level. I think Kevin Stefanski is really smart when he says, well, I hope all of our guys think that. Without he's not smashing the kid and saying, well, you should come to practice. He really stinks. He's also not, he's not building it up. That's the attitude they're trying to foster. His guys are getting better. He's working hard. I think Kevin Stefanski, for all the stuff that he does where he's just intentionally boring, I think the way he handles those types of questions is really smart and could end up working out if Shadur Sanders can figure this thing out.
Absolutely. And I don't think there's any Browns fan or member of the front office or in the media who wouldn't love to see Shadur Sanders come out here and just really ball, but they also don't want to throw him out there before he's ready. Let's talk a little bit about the running game. Quinshon Judkins, 84 yards, 46-yard touchdown, very memorable. 3 touchdowns overall. But, I don't necessarily want to Butch Davis Quinshon Judkins by saying if you ignore the long run, things aren't looking all that great. But if I were to Butch Davis the Quinshon Judkins running game yesterday, I say that without that 46-yarder, he got 24 attempts for 38 yards. Two questions, Pete. First, is this pure justification for the argument that Browns fans were making last week that the team should have run Quinshawn more? Because he got stoned, frequently against the Steelers, and then they went away from the run, or it seemed like they went away from the run. Here, the same thing happened, but they kept feeding him the rock, and eventually he breaks one for 46 yards. Is this, concrete proof that the people who just say keep feeding Judkins the ball were right?
No, definitely not. There's absolutely merit to the idea. If you keep running it, you can eventually break one. The Steelers game, he was running into a concrete barrier. There was nothing there. And at that point, you risk him trying to do something he shouldn't do in terms of breaking something out and putting himself potentially in a situation where he could take a really bad hit and get himself injured. In this game, while I do agree the running game struggled at points, it's really a tale of two halves. In the first half, the Browns were a little bit more effective, moving the Dolphins off the line of scrimmage and creating some lanes. He had a couple nice runs. Obviously, the 46-yarder was the better of the two, and got some really good blocking on there. They ran power. KT Leviston and Wyatt Teller drive guys off the ball. Joel Bitonio pulls, gets a good kick out block. And then Quinshawn Judkins is just special in terms of his athleticism and explosion, and just is able to take it all the way. And it was, and I can even see him there in the photo, and it brings me all kinds of joy that the person who could not make that tackle is none other than Minkah Fitzpatrick. But having said, and in the second half in particular, that's where they got a ton of tackles behind the line of scrimmage. They basically shut him down and really knocked him backwards a few times. If the weather wasn't what it was, I think they go away from it more. I think, yes, they wanted to sort of set a tone with Quinshawn Judkins and feed him the ball and get to that magic number of 25 carries and all that stuff. But what I'd like to see is find ways to get him involved in the passing game. Get the 25 touches. Just come up with different ways to get him the 20. Mix it up more. But as I mentioned earlier, I think the struggles the Browns are having, they don't have the offensive line to just basically dare the opponent to stop them. And the Dolphins came with numbers, got run-throughs, which also, can be some bad situations where maybe he gets hit in the wrong spot or a bad angle or something like that. But at some point, they're just bringing more than you can block, and you're going to get bit for it. So yes, they need to run the ball and they need to be successful. Quinshawn Judkins right now is the centerpiece of this offense, but they need to do it in a way that is going to be successful. They need to do it in a way where they can get Quinshawn Judkins the ball in different capacities that allow him to shine. And then they got to do other things on offense so that the defense can't do what it did against the Browns in this situation, because the Dolphins, came into the game with the 32nd ranked run defense, and the Browns ended up with 84 yards on 25 carries. That's enough to win the game. And the other area where Quinshawn Judkins really shined was in down by the goal line. Mm-hmm. That was extremely encouraging, that they basically said, we're going, you take the quarterback off the field. Yeah. I mean, I suppose Quinshawn Judkins could thrown some ridiculous jump pass, but realistically, the Browns were saying, listen, we're running the ball. We're going to find our way to get in there. And Quinshawn Judkins was able to do it. That is definitely encouraging, but it's very difficult to live this way every week in the NFL. This is something you can do in this type of game where you got this kind of weird weather.
Are you still there, Pete?
Yep.
You froze up on my screen, at least. Okay. Probably just a problem with my screen. One thing that I saw that I really liked, and you talked about it a bit on the post-game show, was Dylan Sampson returning to the field, lining him up as a wide receiver, getting him out there, in space. Why don't we see more of Dylan Sampson? Is it just the poor pass blocking, or It seems to me he's an effective tool to help sort of spread the field.
Well, I'm hoping that that's a vision of things to come, that they were willing to put him out there, because it takes away the one thing he's going to be weakest at. Dylan Samson, barely 200 pounds. He's not. Mm-hmm. He's got to be able to do a little bit better in terms of pass protection and be able to take on a block and chip and those type of things. But he's not going to take on a 260-pound guy square and win that battle. He's just not going to win. That's just a matter of physics. So it comes down to, you either need to have you need to come up with different ways to deploy him. And I was really happy to see him deployed out wide. The Browns have done this with Judkins as well. I'd like to see Judkins get that type of touches in addition to that. But if you could just put the ball in Dylan Sampson's hand, I mean, this is a guy who at Tennessee, his last year, was the offense. SEC defenses knew he was the primary factor and had 11 guys to try to stop him. So what's the easiest way to deal with that if you're the Browns? Move him so he doesn't have to deal with 11 guys. And if he was that successful when they were keying on him, then take some guys out of the picture and create some opportunities that way. And if the Browns, it's another element where if the Browns can prove to the opponent that they're a little bit more serious down the field, then the amount of times they get an empty turn and throw, there's going to be a little bit more space over there. We saw them do this a couple times, and I'm hoping at some point they're going to do some sort of pump and go where somebody sits there and stops and somebody else is faking a block and going downfield, because right now it seems like the Browns getting empty, especially when they're buying the sticks, and you can almost count on the fact it's going to be some kind of screen or something along those lines. I like the idea. I just think you need to keep building on that idea and figure out ways to. But Dylan Sampson has real ability in space as a pass catcher, as does Judkins. And given the issues the Browns are having with the receivers right now, it being so young and trying to figure this whole thing out, it gives you more incentive to put these guys on the field more, even if that means putting Jerome Ford in the backfield, forcing the defense to be honest to the fact that they could still hand the ball off and throw it to these guys. I think has some opportunities to cause some problems.
Yeah, for certain. I want to talk about one other thing while we still have a little bit of time here, and that is the receivers. You take a look at the receptions yesterday. Fannin led you with 36 yards on 4 catches. Thrash 1 for 23. Judy 2 for 17. Corley made a nice play, but only 2 for 17 yards, and then 2 for 10 yards. Again, like the overall 116 yards, it's not going to get it done in the NFL. Fannin looks very good. Judy looks like a shadow of himself from last year. Thrash is unproven. Corley's unproven. I guess the question is, I'm going to get to a question that was in the chat here in a second, but do you think it's an imperative? Let's say we beat the Patriots and we feel like the Browns are back in the race at 3-5.
Scenario.
Pardon me?
I love this scenario. Go ahead.
Let's just hypothesize that they somehow get to 3-5. Does trading for a wide receiver then become an imperative? Do we have to bring someone else in?
Absolutely not. The worst thing I think the Browns can do is chase players in this season. If a great opportunity comes along, as we've seen, whether it was somehow getting Jerry Jeudy the way they did or Amari Cooper the way they did, great. But right now, all indications are this is going to be a lot of teams trying to sell. Maybe there's value there, but I think more than likely teams who claim that. But the other part is some of the guys that they might be trading you might not want. I can think of a guy the Browns traded last year that everybody should be real happy the Browns traded, because the team he went to, he promptly did absolutely nothing for, and then it since retired. You do have to be a little bit of a buyer beware in these situations, because chances are if a team wants to move a guy, they either want to get a really good deal for themselves or they're trying to unload a problem. The other part about this is, look, I understand the instinct to say, let's add more guys. And if you can find the right piece, a young piece that's going to help you, moving forward, great. But if you do that, are we going to be all sitting here in February, March, and April, and specifically people from this region of the state, are we going to be sitting there? Well, they just traded for this guy. Now I can't have Carnell Tate.
Right.
That is the trade-off you have. I think when all is said and done, unless Andrew Berry can come up with another steal of a trade, which I don't think is going to happen this year, I think everybody's going to sit there and go, I'd rather have player X in April than trade for an asset for an NFL player right now. And the other part is the Browns. The Browns, for their part, are going to want to get somebody who's more proven. They have nothing but unproven guys right now, so they really want to add another one. I mean, Malachi Corley is the Jets' third-round pick from last year. Jamari Thrash is the fifth-round pick from last year. Harold Fannon's doing great. He's a rookie. Isaiah Bond, a rookie. They've got a whole lot of inexperience, and I think if they're gonna get more inexperience on this team, it should be a premium asset that people are sitting there going, "Woo, look out for this guy." A Jordan Tyson, a Carnell Tate, a Mekhi Lemon, those type of guys where you sit here and go, "Oh, for the people some people who wish the Browns maybe took Tet McMillan, or God forbid Travis Hunter, for the people who really wish they stayed at 2 and did that type of move where you're sitting there going, oh, I know exactly what I'm getting in terms of the investment. I know and the expectations of that move.
Right. Let's mention a couple names here. Levi comes up with one. Tyler Lockett, released by the Texans. He's a slot receiver. Again, a veteran. A younger guy, Treylon Burks, has been doing the tours around, various camps and trying out and so on and so forth. Either of these guys interest you at all?
I could be mistaken. I thought Burks signed with Washington and then was immediately put on injured reserve. I'm not 100% on that.
Okay.
Tyler Lockett's been great. It would be like the Browns going out and getting the guy they released to is from the Steelers. I mean, the Browns went down this road, didn't like where it led, and ultimately released the veteran. Deontay Johnson was sort of this guy. Tyler Lockett may just be done at this point. And if he's not done, does Tyler Lockett really want to come to Cleveland for, the rest of the season? That's the other part is if Tyler Lockett is coming here, he's coming with the expectation that he's going to be on the field and contribute right away. I don't know that the Browns can facilitate that. But if he's good enough, then he's probably going to want to go on a team. And there are a lot of teams who could use wide receiver help right now with the amount of injuries going on. So you can look at these options. I just don't think either of these are realistic. And if you're the Browns, you have all these guys you want to develop. I mean, we're talking about, on one hand saying, well, let's get more receiver help in here and a more proven guy, while we're also arguing that, well, we need to see both these rookie quarterbacks play. We sort of have to pick a lane on what we're trying to do here in terms of, are we trying to get to work with these young guys and get as much development as possible, live with sort of the challenges that comes with it, hoping that, the guys, the 4 young guys you have mentioned, listed or that we've talked about, Fannin, Thrash, Corley, Bond, so on and so forth. If let's say, Fannin seems to be very good, but if you get one more of those guys to be a good player, then you're going to be really happy. And if then you add another guy in the offseason that's a really good player, then now we're talking about a unit that has some promise. I don't know that there's anything out there that you can really add that's going to really change the direction of this unit in a meaningful way. I could be surprised, but it's just really hard to believe at this point.
Yeah. The most important thing I'm going to take out of tonight's show is that you said Carnell Tate and Cleveland Browns in the same sentence, and that makes me very, very happy.
Well, listen, when I tell in terms of how I look at these things, Carnell Tate is having, he checks boxes. I don't know how old he is, but I assume he's 21 or 22. He's got really good production, way more production than he's had. He's having his breakout year finally. It's really insane, and he's keeping pace with Jeremiah Smith in terms of production. He's got a really good size combination, all those things. So if he's the athlete he appears to be, and I suspect he will be, and he's not an idiot, which I will not know. You'll have to look into that. Then yeah, I mean, he absolutely fits in the basket of guys you sit there and go, I absolutely think this guy could be a good fit for the Browns. Those are, I think, the one thing that was interesting coming into this year was everybody was looking to 2027 as the receiver class because that's when Jeremiah Smith's going to be available. That's when Ryan Williams from Alabama is going to be available. Coleman from Auburn, Wingo from Texas. There's all these guys that everybody have been waiting for since high school. Having said that, the class this year, which most people thought was going to be worse than last year, it not only looks like it's going to be better, but is really, really impressed. And all of a sudden, certainly if the Browns can get a great quarterback, that's great. But if the Browns aren't super satisfied with the offensive lineman at the top of the draft, and I'm not going to go there and say that that's fate because Armand Membu, nobody knew who he was until basically February, and he went 6th.
Right.
That if you can get one of those guys, like, let's use the scenario here. People who don't like Mason Graham, which the Browns would have taken a wide receiver. But if the Browns were to take, let's say they took Tech McMillan last year and then they come back this year and take a defensive tackle, whoever it is, I think the Browns have a chance to then get the better of the players in each of those two spots.
Right. Well, we'll be talking about it for quite a while this upcoming spring, but it's exciting to think about infusing 2 first-round talents into the Browns offense. A couple questions. Let's just get through them. Chris MS asking a little bit about the strategy to beat the Patriots. Ask your opinion on what you think we have to do in order to get an advantage on them.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to cause some problems for Drake May. He is playing at an unreal level right now. They have a talented receiver in Stephon Diggs who's sort of having a resurgent year. Having said that, they haven't really played a tough schedule, or I should say they've played sort of a weird schedule. They lost to the Raiders to open the season. Like, it's hard to fathom. They beat the Buffalo Bills in what was a good win for them. They played. I think the Dolphins game for them was 33-27. They lost the Steelers in part because they kept putting the ball on the ground. In that game, I think they had 5 turnovers. So you look at their record, you place. I don't know how they're going to pull this off. And that is all true. But I also sit there and wonder if they're not quite as good as maybe they've been made out to be, and that Jim Schwartz can come with a good plan to sort of counter Josh McDaniels. On the other side of the ball, Christian Gonzalez is really good at corner. They've spent some money in some good spots. Milton Williams being one of those guys. Harold Landry's been pretty good for the Patriots this year. I still don't know if their pass rush is that good, which might work to the Browns' favor if they can create some plays. But I do worry about the Patriots secondary. So, one, Quinshon Judkins is going to have to get it going, and they're going to have the secondary honest and keep guys out of the box so they have more space. Control the ball as much as they can. They have to win. They cannot turn over the ball. They have to win that if possible. And fortunately for the Browns, the Patriots running backs love to fumble. So if they can take advantage of that in their favor, but they've got to play clean football and then find a way for this offense to produce more points if they're going to do that. Dylan Gabriel's got to grow up a little bit this week and show some real growth if they're going to win this one.
Yeah. They're playing away. They're playing on the road again. Now, Serge wants to know if our defense can perform on the road for once. I really think the problem is more on the offensive side, playing on the road, dealing with the noise, trying not to make mistakes, all that sort of stuff. Do you see this team becoming a better road team as these rookies gain more experience through the course of this year? Or is there just something? I mean, you look at it, the exception of the London game, they've gotten hammered on the road, and it hasn't gone well for them.
Well, I mean, the London game was a home game, so I mean, of course they did well. But I mean, look, this is one of those things where it's the one thing that's supposed to travel is defense, and for the Browns, it's been a weird sort of issue for them in terms of they seemingly feed off the energy at home or whatever it is. They seem to be really, really good in Cleveland, and then they're not bad. I mean, it's not like the Browns are getting killed on the road, but here's hoping that the tweaks they've made are carry over and they can be effective with them, and that gives them another dynamic that can cause some real problems for the opponent. Because if they can cause turnovers on top of everything else, or do what they did in this past game where they score points or set up 21 points off turnovers, is a really good recipe to win. If they can find a way to use that to get them energized, then great. Like that would be something to behold for this group. Because I mean, the other problem you want to avoid, and this is where, we don't know because we've only seen this thing for one game and the Browns won in a blowout. The Browns defense is put in an awkward position that it feels like at times there's a fragility involved. If they give up a big play, everybody immediately assumes the Browns are going to lose because the offense has been so ineffective. And I do think there's a pressure on them to do that. And I'm hoping that this gives them a little bit more juice, allows them to play more freely. But we'll see if they are actually willing to commit to that and live with sort of what goes with that, or if they're going to play more conservatively until they're able to find a lead. And if they get themselves behind, then they're going to really play tightly, both in terms of strategy as well as just how they play. And if that sort of hurts them overall.
Right. Let's get to two more questions before we go. Another question from Levi. He says, "Hey, Pete, could Emerson be a future coverage safety? If you like Campbell and Ward at the cornerback spots, can you use Emerson on the field at the same time, I guess?"
I haven't seen anything to suggest he can play safety other than this is one of those things where people assume slow corners, perhaps physical corners, can transition to that. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but the biggest thing that safeties have on corners isn't a lack of athleticism. It's an abundance of intelligence and awareness. That's, unknown at this point with Martin Emerson. Is he smart enough to do those things and be able to handle the responsibilities that go with that? So at this point, if it was this simple, there'd be a hell of a lot more good safeties in the NFL because there'd be a whole lot of bad corners that move to safety. So I think right now, Emerson's best chance moving forward is to somehow come back healthy enough from the Achilles. Hopefully him being young enough helps him, but I think he's going to be a corner.
Okay. And last question from E. Gillen. Speaking of offense, any news on Conklin? The Browns really need to shore up the tackles. Overall, the OL had trouble opening up run holes for Q. That's certainly the case. That question is answered, I believe, in Rumor Central. And yes. E. Gillen, I'm pretty sure that you are a subscriber. So go in and check that out. I don't remember exactly what Lane said, but he had some information on that. If you are not a subscriber, then please feel free to use the QR code in the upper left of your screen to go to our subscription page, and you can see what you get for subscriptions and support the OBR, support these video programs that we do each week here on YouTube. So with that being said, for Pete Smith, I am Barry McBride. We will be back next week, hopefully fortified with Lane, for another edition of Gang of Three. Good night, everybody.